direction or dig where we can zag.
We will walk through walls.
We will take a look around us.
We will not be confined.
We believe in the path of least limits.
We won't be told how to view the world.
We will experience true freedom.
We will not compromise. We will live the game through our hands.
We will be in control of something. We will change the system.
Does the internet really need another Super Mario 64 retrospective? I mean, this game is probably one of the most popular in terms of online discussion, but that really speaks to the legendary status that it's held over the last 27 years. I'm sure everyone can recall where they first played it. In this video though, I want to focus more on the game itself rather than nostalgia and historical backgrounds, although I will say outright that Super Mario 64 is one of the most important games ever made. Spearheading 3D game design, the collectathon genre, camera control, I could go on all day. It deserves lots of respect for being the first of its kind in many aspects, but like any game, it deserves to be critiqued for what it is. Without further ado, this is Super Mario 64.
Super Mario. 1, 2, and 3. There's power in numbers. Nintendo, now you're playing with power.
It's basically impossible to find someone who hasn't at least heard of Mario. He's considered the face of video games for a reason. 2D Mario is so simple that it can appeal to practically anyone. You run from point A to point B while jumping over obstacles, defeating enemies, and collecting coins and power-ups for an easier time. As the series went on, several different features would be added to help flesh out the gameplay and stop it from getting stale. But this is simply the basis for 2D Mario. It's what makes it so accessible and is likely the reason why the franchise is still a worldwide phenomenon nearly 40 years later. When 1996 rolled around though, everything was changing. A new dimension was being introduced, and as usual, Mario was the one to set the standard for other franchises to follow. Narratively, Super Mario 64 is similar to before. Peach is kidnapped by Bowser and Mario sets out to save her. Although now her castle has been taken over by Bowser and the magical power stars have been sealed away inside a world's locked behind paintings, Mario has to collect enough power stars to progress through the various floors of the castle and eventually kick Bowser's ass. With new hardware comes change however, as Nintendo was able to smartly translate or update most aspects of 2D Mario to the third dimension. Power-ups no longer serve just to give you an extra attack or hit point. Now there's only 3 of them and they're all context sensitive, mixing up the gameplay every now and again. The simple world map where you chose which level you wanted to play has become a huge hub world with secrets around every corner, having you jump into paintings to be transported to the worlds encapsulated by the art. Enemies aren't nearly as much of a threat in 64 compared to the 2D game, since you can just walk around them rather than having to jump over them or attack them. But you're still encouraged to engage with them, since each of the main 15 levels will give you a power star for collecting 100 coins, which is already a fun and fitting objective. But most enemies will drop coins, and more aggressive ones like piranha plants will drop a blue coin, which is worth 5. In a 2D space, it's hard to give Mario more moves than just run, jump and crouch. To accommodate for the new dimension and make it seem like a true new step, Mario's moveset was tremendously expanded on, with lots of new jumps and attacks for more freedom and variety. I think what makes Mario 64 so fun to control is the amount of different moves you can pull off and how they can be chained together. The triple jump, wall jump, long jump, backflip, somersault, dive and ground pound have all become staples of 2D Mario, and most of them can be combined to make platforming even more fun. A wall jump and dive can be used to sequence break and reach other platforms that are further away, like in Womp's Fortress here, where you need to skip about half of the trip to the top. The long jump is great for building momentum and covering long distances, with the cost that it locks you into a straight line, requiring you to plan out your movements. The game is designed in a way so that there are endless combinations to experiment with, and different ways to tackle challenges, meaning small decisions are being made every few seconds without the player realising, since chaining moves together is so fluid. And I think that the slightly janky controls mix well with the more open level design in most circumstances. It was an incredibly smart decision choice to make the first time you gain control of Mario be in front of the castle in its wide open space. There's a clear path forward if you want to just progress into the castle, but you can choose to screw around as much as you want in this area, and get accustomed to the controls, a natural and fitting way to let the player adapt to the third dimension. But as a first for any game really, 64 implements camera control. The C buttons on the controller let you switch between a few different angles depending on where you are, which was groundbreaking for the time. I imagine it difficult to create a 3D platform with a fixed angle, and it might be a bit complicated for some players to have to work so many different areas of movement, but for the time, shifting the perspective that let you see the action from after years of simply seeing it from a set scrolling angle was an absolute revolution. To show how much of a jump this was back then, the camera is actually a broadcast by Lakitu to the news. I didn't really think about this until recently, but it's an incredibly smart way to normalize camera control and make the player feel like the true focus. 2D Mario games often have straightforward level design with one path to the end and occasional secrets to look for. This is why I resonate with 2D Sonic more than I do 2D Mario. There are different paths to explore, secrets are more rewarding to find and are frankly more impactful, and every individual zone is distinct with its own set pieces and gimmicks, so they're far more memorable and fun to play around with. The N64 simply wasn't capable of creating lots of linear levels that Mario could run through similar to the 2D games, so instead, the developers opted to create 15 large, more expansive levels that all contain individual missions of their own. Each time you complete a mission, you'll earn a power star, which act as keys for you to progress. Each floor of the castle houses its own set of levels, and when you collect the required amount of power stars to unlock the Bowser level for that floor and beat him in a boss fight, you'll get a key to the next floor. Rinse and repeat until you reach Bowser in the sky and beat the game. It borrows aspects from the world by world structure, but it's a huge improvement on that foundation since there's absolutely zero mandatory missions besides the 3 Bowser fights, and 1 mission in Dire Docks. You can choose 70 of the 120 total power stars you want to collect. This is not only a great choice to help players express themselves more and play the game in their own way without loads of annoyances, but it makes Super Mario 64 infinitely replayable. There are thousands of possible paths in an any percent run, so unless you intentionally plan out which missions to do in an order, you'll always get a different experience as far as pacing and variety are concerned. Further strengthened by the sheer amount of diversity in the level design and the mission selections. Sometimes you'll be platforming, sometimes you'll be exploring, sometimes you'll be solving puzzles, sometimes you'll be using a cat power to sneak into a metal gate or fly into some rings. It all makes Mario 64 very engaging since you'll always likely have a wide variety of missions at your disposal. Take Bob-omb Battlefield, the first level in the game and one of the best examples of introducing the player to this new dimension. The first mission, Big Bob-omb on the summit, sees you following the main path up the top of the mountain, avoiding some enemies and doing some light platforming along the way, to fight King Bob-omb and get the Power Star. Mission 2 has you racing a Koopa to the top of the mountain, testing your knowledge of the controls and hazards to basically say, okay, you did this before, now do it again, but better. Sure, the timer is very lenient, but for someone that's new to 3D games, this might be a challenge for them, and it serves its purpose well. Mission 4 has you scouring the level for 8 red coins, forcing you to explore every nook and cranny to find them. It encourages players to delve into new territory. Mission 5 has you using the wing cap to fly into some rings in the sky and making sure you know how to use the thing. And Mission 6 is a nice puzzle. I know that I struggled with this on my first time through, but it turns out that you have to ground pound on the stump holding the chain jump down so it destroys the gate, opening up access to the star for you. There's even a red coin on top of the stump to give you a hint at what to do. This level basically encapsulates each part of Mario 64's game design, and I think that's why it's so well regarded. Jolly Roger Bay is also very open, having the player properly learn how to control Mario in the water, doing slow-paced, more puzzle-oriented missions like clearing the giant eel out of the sunken ship, then entering it to grab the star. After this mission, the ship rises to the top of the water and you can use it to grab the rest of the red coins, a nice little sense of story progression that I love. Bob-omb Battlefield does this too actually. There's a pit of 2 iron balls at the bottom of the mountain, which changes to 3 after you beat the first mission, meaning that this is basically the corpse of King Bob-omb. Dark, I know, but it's pretty cool. I always love the 100 coin star of Jolly Roger Bay since it only has 103 coins in total. You really have to have a keen eye in order to collect all of them, including acting fast when there's a blue coin switch. I usually don't like water levels in video games, but this is an exception, and I think that part of this might be because of the incredible music that accompanies you. It also succeeds way more than the other water level, Dire Docks, because it's mostly a wide open space to explore instead of 2 small areas connected by a long, boring tunnel. Hazy Maze Cave is like an open-ended labyrinth where basically every star requires some sort of puzzle solving. Riding Dory to the island where a star is, seeing a star on a platform at the top of the level and finding the right path to it, using a strange contraption to collect red coins, it all ties into creative thinking and observation. Wet Dry World has you changing water levels to reach different heights for an easy way of traversal, or you can skillfully use your various jumps to sequence break and get around faster. Contrary to popular opinion, I think it's an absolute blast and one of my favourite levels in the game. There's even an abandoned town hidden away, behind a large cage that you can only reach using a cannon which contains the red coin challenge, having you wall jump around buildings to get them all. I also love that how high you jump into the painting determines how high the water will be when you get into the level. Such a cool touch. Lethal Lava Land has these interesting bully enemies that can push you into lava, and fighting them is insanely fun since you have to ground pound them to knock them back really far. Or you could just do a regular jump into them. This is made even scarier considering that you always fight them on platforms surrounded by lava, meaning that you'll want to focus more on combat to avoid burning to death. The volcano section is also very fun with some challenging platforming to engage with. These secret entrances to whole new parts of the level are always a treat to discover, with the biggest by far being the pyramid and shifting sand land. It's probably bigger than the main part of the level. I think that these more open explorative levels are where 64 exceeds most of the time, but even then, more vertical or platforming focused levels can be fun in their own right. Womp's Fortress is a bit more restrictive with some prevalent bottomless pits, but the level is entirely built around the fact that the player will be taking a slower approach, with the thin planks of wood you have to cross, the walls that shift regularly capable of pushing you to your death, and the large amount of piranha plants to contend with. Cool Mountain mostly has you descending, using slopes to zip around and using skips to forge your own path, with a racetrack hidden away that has you compete against a cocky penguin who gives you a power star for beating him. And all of these levels have their own unique missions that force players to think in different ways to succeed. The large amount of variety present in Super Mario 64's levels is what helps them feel so fresh and addictive to both returning players and new ones. And I think that's a big part of the reason why many think it stood the test of time. My favourite level in the game is Big Boo's Haunt, which is ironic because of my hate for the ghost levels in 2D Mario. Why is this level so good? Well, I think it covers the basis of 64's mission structure perfectly, a spooky, unsettling mansion begging to be explored. Mission 1 has you seeking out all the ghosts in the mansion and defeating them to summon a mini-boss, which opens up the staircase to the top of the mansion upon beating it, unlocking the rest of the level. It forces you to be observant while making sure that you don't accidentally slip into a pit or screw up one of your attacks. Mission 2 has you venturing underneath the mansion to fight a swarm of boos on a creepy merry-go-round while fire shoots at you from the paintings. Mission 3 has you entering a code in the library to reach the star. Mission 4 has you scavenging for some very well hidden red coins. And Mission 6 has you using the vanish cap to find a secret room behind a painting. This level has so many mysteries to discover, helped by the large amount of skips that you can do by utilising Mario's movement in different ways. You don't even need to do the first mission to reach the top floor, you can just do a precise wall jump and dive to get up there early, and I love that this stuff exists. Probably wasn't intentional, but it makes revisits to each level fun since you can brainstorm new ideas and ways to complete missions faster thanks to the fluid control. Boss fights were always a staple of 2D Mario, but I'd never say they were a strength. You'd usually fight one boss at the end of each world as an act of closing the book on this part of your adventure. These bosses were never really great and mostly amounted to no more than waiting for an attack or two to come out before you can jump on the boss's head and finish the fight. They never felt climactic, more so just like formalities before the end of the level. 7 of the main levels in 64 have bosses, and they all make use of different moves that Mario can pull off. For example, King Bob-omb has you get behind him and pick him up and throw him to do damage. Womp King has you get on top of him after he tried to crush you in order to ground pound him. Big Bully has you charge at him and jump at the right time to knock him off the platform. It feels like they wanted to just show off the variety of moves that Mario can pull off, instead of making creative and fun boss fights. They aren't really bad, they just sort of happen, much like the bosses of the 2D games. Well, at least the Bowser fights were a lot better. You have to grab onto his tail, swing him around, and time your throw so he hits one of the many bombs on the outside of the arena. This is a fun setup, even though the first 2 fights are very easy and similar. The final fight though is a nice challenge. You have to throw him into 3 bombs instead of 1. His attacks are more devastating, and for the final hit, the area begins to break all around you, forcing you to hit a bomb that's further away. They aren't the best boss fights ever or anything, but they're still solid. Like I said before, beating Bowser will give you a key to the next floor of the castle containing new levels. I think that Princess Peach's castle is a great hub that's always fun to come back to. Jumping into paintings so into the levels feels like you're stepping into the world drawn by the imagination of the artist. even when the painting is a bit more minimalistic. There are also 15 secret stars to obtain from the secrets and hidden mini levels around the castle, as well as entrances to areas that you can unlock each cat power from, so there's a reason to poke around besides just looking for level entrances. These mini levels usually don't amount to more than just a simple red coin challenge, but I appreciate the extra content and effort to make it feel more complete. The different colours used on the various floors make you feel like you're progressing, especially the third floor with its warm blue walls making you feel like you've ascended high into the sky, fitting of the final stretch of the game. The purple sky in the final challenge before you beat Bowser really cements this too. I love it. Super Mario 64 is really something special, and it's not hard to see why so many people were and still are enamored with it. I know I was when I was a kid. It might not look very visually appealing now, but for the first true 3D platformer that broke boundaries and set in stone what a game should look like in 1996, it's incredibly impressive, and 27 years later, that's a very big win. Although, unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. Like I've said throughout this retrospective, 64 was the first of many things, but that doesn't mean it's completely flawless. I have my fair share of issues with the game that I never fail to bring up when talking about the game at length. So forgive me if this seems a little harsh on a game that pushed the industry forward so much. Mistakes were bound to be made after all, but it's still a video game that deserved to be critiqued. First of all, while I understand that camera control was revolutionary for the time, 64's camera is problematic. Most of the time the camera is relatively competent, even with most areas only having a few angles to shift between, but there are some sections where it makes maneuvering Mario a huge pain in the arse. Particularly in sections with tighter platforming, and it can lead to your death a lot of the time. The carpet ride in Rainbow Ride requires quick reactions and reflexes to avoid the obstacles that come your way, which isn't helped by a camera that doesn't want to show you an angle that will let you see what's coming your way, with a shadow in view too. So you'll just try to desperately find one that's good enough before you eventually die, because the carpet is going to disappear if you don't stand on it for a while. Or how about the red coin challenge in Tiny Huge Island where you need to jump onto these tiny platforms with huge ledges to grab onto. But oh wait, while you can't see anything because of the camera, let's put an enemy here that can spit fire at you. Wonderful. Some of the time you won't get issues like this, you'll simply get an angle that makes you think, okay, this isn't ideal but it sort of works. But it can be especially annoying for levels that are more platform oriented, or missions that take a long time. The levels on offer in the third and second floors of the castle aren't quite as good as the ones of the first floor in the basement. Tick-Tock Clock and Rainbow Ride have fundamental issues that cause me to always skip them on any percent playthroughs, and they easily have the worst use of the mission structure. Tick-Tock Clock is a huge vertical platforming gauntlet with obstacles reminiscent of a giant clock, as you'd expect. I think it's a cool idea for a level, especially since the position of the hand that you jump into the painting determines the speed of the obstacles, but that's where my praises end unfortunately. The first mission has you climb about halfway up the level to grab the star that's sitting in a cage. The second mission has you climbing about 3/4 of the level in order to grab the star. The third mission has you climbing about 1/4 of the level to grab the star. Do you see the issue here? Not only is there little to no variety in these missions, but every star is just placed at different parts of the level, which doesn't sound too bad, right? I mean, you can probably get the lowest one and then grab every other one on your way to the top, except you can't. Which brings me to one of my biggest problems with 64 from a pacing perspective. Every single time you collect a star, with very few exceptions, you're sent out of the level and right back to the castle. I think that this was partly done due to hardware constraints, and it's more forgivable in some levels than others. As much as I wish that I could get everything done in Bob on Battlefield in one clean run and be done with it, it is nice that beating the first mission sends you back to the start, since that's where Koopa spawns in order to race you. But in a level like Tick-Tock Clock, it becomes very, very boring having to climb up the same level over and over again to get everything when it can easily be just achieved in a single run. There's no hardware excuse for it in this case either, since there's nothing being changed about the level besides maybe a couple of small platforms being placed. Rainbow Ride might be even worse about this. It's absurdly messy, with half of the level requiring you to ride these slow, boring carpets to get anywhere. There are 3 stars on this section, one of which is at the top of a flying ship, and another is on an island that you can reach by using the cannon on the ship. This only takes an extra 15 seconds to get than the one that's just sitting on the ship, so why have the player do the whole journey again, waiting around for minutes on end just to see the position that they were in before? It makes no sense and feels like a poor attempt at lengthening the runtime. Also, good fucking luck getting the 100 coin star on this level, since the blue coins that you have to collect are at the top of this vertical maze, where you have to wall jump under the gun of a timer, ruined by the fact that the wall jump needs a very precise button press to be activated. Ugh, I never set foot here unless I'm going for completion. It's not just that these two levels are poorly designed either. Tall Mountain is a bit more fun than TikTok Clock, but has the same problem in terms of mission structure, having you just climb up different parts of the mountain to get all the stars. And Tiny Huge Island is a massive chore to get around when it's huge, and a clunky slippery mess when it's tiny. Why do they make you traverse this level in the most nightmarish way possible? You have to take so many long routes to get anywhere. And even though I praised them before, your worst enemy during a lot of these late game levels is the way that Mario controls. Now, I said before that he controlled well, and for the most part he does, but what I meant is that he controls well when in open spaces. When the tight platforming gets thrown into the mix, I don't blame anyone for getting frustrated and giving up on these later levels, because TikTok Clock and Rainbow Ride can be absolutely infuriating. Mario's turning is very stiff, but you won't notice that until you're placed into a section with small platforms. This makes moving him around on one of the carpets on Rainbow Ride a pain, especially since he can't turn at all during a jump, so there's basically no way to reorient yourself when obstacles are coming your way during a carpet ride. I guess you could use a mid-air kick to stop your momentum, but that also means it could get shifted backwards and ending up with you falling to your death anyway. It just makes a few of these repetitive levels even more painful. This sense of repetition is present throughout a lot of different parts of the game, like repeating boss fights up to 3 times in a level that aren't even that good to begin with, and having to do the secret slide twice in order to get the regular star and the one for beating it in a time limit because you can't grab both at once for some reason. It's not like linear levels can't work in this game or something, but their design just has to work well with the mission structure, or better yet, not include it. Every Bowser fight has a linear platforming level that takes place just before it that requires you to just get to the end, and these are very fun. They feel like a true callback to one of the more challenging aspects of 2D Mario, with the final one being especially difficult. They all have a red coin challenge too, adding just a hint of exploration into the mix. These feel like they were thought through properly, and they're a nice change of pace. You can run through, grab the star at the end skillfully for collecting all the coins, fight Bowser and be done with it. Dire Docks is so boring. It's made up of 2 confined bodies of water with mediocre objectives that force you to swim between this long tunnel to get anywhere, and once you do, the challenge usually just involves waiting around for several minutes, or trying to not get sucked into the most annoying whirlpool known to man. This wouldn't be so bad if you could just get everything in one shot, but of course you're sent right back to the castle after every single star. It might not seem like that big of an issue in isolation, but it really does add up. Now, all of these issues can be easily ironed out, and depending on who you are, there's a definitive version of Super Mario 64 there for you. 64 was remade on the DS as a launch title, which was absolutely mind-blowing for the time. Like, in 3 years, handheld gaming went from this to this. It's insanely impressive and adds quite a lot to the original game. New playable characters in the form of Luigi, Wario and Yoshi that all bring new movesets to the table, 30 additional stars bringing the total to 150, brand new levels to explore, a few tweaks to the level design to make it more forgiving, like some extra ground at the bottom of Womp's Fortress and TikTok Clock, to make them less frustrating should you happen to misplace a jump. There are also tons of really fun and addictive minigames to play in Peach's Rec Room that you unlock more of over time, which I spent dozens of hours on as a kid. Well, this is all awesome stuff, but my biggest issue with this version are the controls. My god, they are awful. There are a few small improvements here, like having you slide down walls to execute a wall jump instead of bonking off it, but keep in mind, the DS doesn't have an analog stick, only a D-pad, so you can kiss 352 of those directions goodbye, as we now are restricted to only 8. Playing a game that's designed for full analog control with only 8 directions feels extremely clumsy, and I honestly don't know how I managed to put up with this as a kid and 100% the game. I spoke with a few friends on this matter recently, and they were torn on whether they prefer the N64 or DS version of the game. One of my buds says that 360-degree movement does exist in the DS version, since you'll gently turn to each of the 8 directions, creating the illusion of full analog control. Admittedly, he's not entirely wrong, but then you have the same issue of holding one of these directions for long periods of time, since, again, it's just a transitional movement. It doesn't help in tight platforming challenges or more difficult sections, and the D-pad isn't very comfortable to play a 3D game with for a long period of time to begin with. I just don't find it to be a very fun experience. Like I said, it feels noticeably more clumsy to play, and the fluidity of chaining together moves is simply not there, at least not near as much as before. I unfortunately can't recommend the DS version over the 64 version unless you're incredibly bored of the original game. I wouldn't call it a bad remake at all. It makes so many cool improvements, but it's a very 2 steps forward, 1 step back situation. In my opinion, the definitive way to play Mario 64 is an unofficial fan remaster called Super Mario 64 Plus for PC. This game takes a ROM of Mario 64 and rebuilds it to incorporate tons of great changes and additions to make it literally impossible for me to go back to the original. You get the basic stuff like widescreen, 60 FPS and texture filtering options, but you also get improved controls to make movement more snappy and responsive. Nice bonuses like improved air control to remove those annoying moments where you have to be fully committed to your jump arc. There are added moves like wall sliding and ground pound jumps straight from Mario Odyssey, along with stuff like rolling and being able to dive out of a ground pound, along with full camera control to eliminate the problematic issue with the camera. All of this stuff is great, but my absolute favourite tweak to the overall game are the progression fixes. When collecting a star, you're now given the choice whether you want to stay in the level or not, which is an absolute lifesaver. It completely eliminates every pacing issue and actually gets me to enjoy TikTok Clock and Tall Mountain. There are skins for Mario, a newly added hard mode and an encore mode, adjustable UI elements, options to restore unused content. It's everything that I want out of an improved version of 64 and more. I never want to play any other version of the game again now I have the definitive version on PC. For all I've praised it, and for all I've criticised it, Super Mario 64 is a fascinating title and is still one of my favourites. I always saw Mario as one to push boundaries and subvert expectations. As far as back Super Mario Bros, he set the standard for the platforming genre. Super Mario World was a next-gen evolution of a 2D platformer, and Super Mario 64 was a brand new frontier. It was many people's introduction to 3D video games, and I can't imagine how breathtaking it must have been in 1996 to first jump into Bob-omb Battlefield, or fly around with the wing cap, or grab the final power star upon defeating Bowser. I remember when I first beat the game on the DS, I was about 7 or 8, and I felt a huge sense of accomplishment. It was the first game I ever beat on my own after all. Mario 64 has completely surpassed video game status at this point in time. It's a phenomenon that still has more consistent support by fans than a vast number of other Nintendo games, which just shows its unrivaled impact on the industry. On one hand, it's an exceptional masterpiece of game design that few can emulate the highs of. On the other though, it's a clunky mess that drops off the cliff at the end of the game. But hey, if 80% of the game is a fun, fluid 3D platform with some of the most memorable locations and level design I've ever seen in a video game, I can say that it rises above its shortcomings and deserves to be remembered as fondly as it is. It was a successful step into the third dimension and an unforgettable landmark of the industry. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.